I knew I was invisible the moment my own manager introduced me to the room like I was a temp from accounting. "This is Samantha. She's been involved with Delta," he mumbled, while Kevin from marketing, who once spelled algorithm with a Y, nodded along like he was Moses parting the dev roadmap. Never mind that I'd architected the damn thing. From whiteboard to beta, Delta was my brainchild. I'd pitched it during a lunch break 2 years ago, coded the prototype over long weekends, and shepherded it through every bureaucratic hurdle with duct tape and coffee. And now, as it started catching the attention of mid-tier analysts and vendor scouts, it had apparently evolved into some collective corporate hallucination where no one remembered how it started or who started it. What burned wasn't just the credit theft. It was the smiling indifference. The way Gary from product nodded solemnly in meetings and echoed my exact words 15 seconds later like he'd just translated them from some divine realm. Exactly what I was about to say, he'd smirk. And they'd laugh, they'd nod. No one laughed when I said it first. Delta was supposed to be the thing that changed that. It was clean, efficient, scalable, the kind of internal infrastructure fix that doesn't make headlines but quietly saves companies millions. And it was working. We were ahead of schedule, under budget, and solving problems nobody even realized were problems until we solved them. But every win got quietly reassigned to some dude with a LinkedIn headshot and a personal brand. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't looking for parades. I just wanted one damn person to say, "Hey, Sam, you built something good." Instead, the last time I spoke in a company-wide meeting, the CTO mispronounced my name and thanked Mark for leading the Delta initiative. Mark, who once asked me what an API endpoint was. "Oh, and if you've made it this far without rage quitting in secondhand embarrassment, do us a favor. Hit that subscribe and like button. Over 90% of people never do, and the team eats feelings for breakfast. Your click helps us cry less, probably." Anyway, I stayed. I kept my head down. I cleaned up code merges at 1 a.m. and onboarded new hires who asked if I was contractor or full-time. I answered Jira tickets with kindness and kept a spreadsheet of every decision approved and timestamped, because something in my gut, something cold and familiar, told me I'd need it someday. And then came the whispers. New leadership, organizational realignment. A fresh voice to cut through the noise. We all know what that means. It's never a whisper about you until your calendar starts disappearing and your badge stops working on floor 3. The funny thing is, even as the walls started shifting, I still wanted to believe I was essential. That Delta was too valuable, too core, too visibly successful to be tossed aside. We'd saved the company hundreds of billable hours, prevented client churn, created a back-end structure so smooth even sales noticed. But in corporate, value is whatever someone louder says it is. I remember one Thursday morning, we were prepping the quarterly usage review. I'd pulled an all-nighter polishing the graphs, double-checking the uptime metrics, and turning every bullet point into CFO-friendly language. I walked into the meeting bleary-eyed and hopeful. My slide deck already replaced. My numbers? Revised by Kevin, who'd sent a last-minute update in Comic Sans because it looked more friendly. I left early that day. Sat in my car, air conditioning blasting even though it was October. Just sat, thinking, not about revenge, not yet, but about how many times a woman like me builds the engine and then gets thanked for being a great team player while someone else drives it off the lot with her name scrubbed from the patent filing. I thought about the contract I'd signed, about the clause I'd once laughed at, about the conversation I had with a friend in legal, Kim, who said, "Samantha, don't assume anyone remembers what you did. Document everything." So I started backing things up, quietly, off-network. I bought a new laptop with my own money. I mirrored the entire logic of Delta's framework in a sandbox environment, clean, proprietary, untouched by their servers. Nights and weekends, no one knew, no one asked, because no one ever really looked at me. Not long enough to see the storm I was building. Not yet. Tanya arrived like a thunderclap in a perfume ad, sharp heels, sharper cheekbones, a Bluetooth headset surgically fused to her skull. Day one, she walked through the office like she already owned the walls, dropping corporate jargon like confetti, vertical alignment, customer journey mapping, synergistic ideation. Half of it sounded like it was scraped off a PowerPoint template written by ChatGPT on cocaine. Everyone smiled, everyone nodded, except me. I sat in the back during her first all hands, watching her rearrange our roadmap like she was Marie Kondoing a crime scene. Projects got axed mid-sentence. Budgets were realigned. She called it disruption. I called it a slow-motion throat punch. When she got to Delta, she didn't even say the name, just a hand wave. We're sunsetting some legacy initiatives that aren't aligned with future-forward objectives. Legacy, like I was a fax machine. At the end of her first week, 4 people were restructured into early retirement. Tanya brought in her own people, new ops lead, new product manager, even a new business visualization strategist, which I think is Latin for guy who makes graphs and steals credit. Nobody said my name, not once. Not in sync meetings, not in daily stand-ups, not even in the weekly roundup email that used to feature Delta's milestones. I was just not mentioned. The team still came to me with bugs, but it felt like they were sneaking out of class to visit a forbidden teacher. I smiled, nodded, kept fixing things, but my gut, My gut started screaming. That's when Kim pulled me aside. Kim from legal. Quiet. Brilliant. The only person who ever brought her own mug to meetings because she didn't trust the break room dishwasher. She found me in the elevator lobby one morning, leaned in and whispered, "Back it all up. Off network, now." I blinked. What? Why? She didn't answer. Just walked away, sipping black coffee like it was moonshine. That's the thing about Kim: when she gives you a warning, you don't ask for paragraph. You just listen, so I started digging. Delta's architecture, project logs, API keys, test case results. I downloaded what I could when I could, at night, on weekends, using my own gear. I encrypted backups and air-gapped drives. Not to sabotage, never that. I loved Delta like a child, I just didn't trust the babysitter. At first, it felt paranoid. But then Tanya started realigning Jira boards. Tickets disappeared. My Git access got limited without explanation. And then one afternoon, I saw it, a Trello card labeled Delta Decommission Timeline. No mention of me, just a list of shutdown milestones, approved by Tanya and her handpicked PM Nick, who once thought JSON was a new protein bar. I didn't rage, I didn't cry. I just opened a fresh folder on my desktop and labeled it Vest Plan Beta. The name didn't mean anything to them, but it meant everything to me. I already had a quiet LLC registered from a side consulting gig a year prior. Dormant, legal, unused. Now it had a name, a future. Delta wouldn't die, it would just go home. And the deeper I looked into my original employment contract, the more I realized something. Delta's IP hadn't been formally transferred. Not fully. There was a clause, so dusty no one had probably read it in years, that stated IP ownership passed to the company only upon full-scale deployment and final sign-off. We were still in internal beta. Tanya had halted rollout, which meant the engine was still in my garage, and Tanya had just slammed the brakes halfway down the highway. The air around the office got tighter. People smiled more nervously. Tanya's new team started skipping invite-only meetings, and I stopped getting calendar requests altogether. But I wasn't idle. I was building, not from scratch, oh no. I had the blueprint, the code, the use cases. I had the lessons learned. All I needed was time and silence. Tanya gave me both because she didn't see me, not really. I wasn't loud enough. I didn't play golf. I didn't say crush it in meetings, to her. I was just some legacy static to be cleared. She had no idea that static could still burn down the whole transmission. I knew something was wrong the moment my Slack logged me out mid-message. I was typing a response to one of the junior devs, walking him through a system error Delta had already fixed twice, and then poof. Gray screen. Login failed. I refreshed, tried the browser version. Nothing. Then my calendar vanished, all my meetings, gone like someone had taken a corporate eraser to my existence. I checked my badge access, suspended. Email, dead, not disabled, erased, like I'd never existed. The call came 30 seconds later. Tanya's voice, syrupy and smug, poured through the speaker. "Samantha, we've decided to sunset Project Delta effective immediately. Your role is no longer aligned with strategic priorities, so your access has been revoked. There's a packet coming from HR. You don't need to return to the office. Good luck out there." It was the way she said good luck out there, like she was sending me into the wilderness with a granola bar and a wink that lit the fuse, but I didn't yell. I didn't stutter. I didn't plead. I just said 4 words, "But you forgot something." She went quiet, just long enough to register confusion. Then the line went dead. No follow-up, no clarification, just a click. I sat there, phone in one hand, laptop in the other, staring at the screen like it owed me an apology. The silence in the room got loud. I could hear the hum of the fridge in the kitchen. My own breath sounded like a threat. You think you know rage? Try building something from nothing, nurturing it like a child, only to have it ripped from your hands by someone who couldn't tell a database from a doorstop. But I didn't scream. I didn't slam anything. I reached under my desk, pulled out a flat black case, and unzipped it. Inside, my personal laptop. Different OS, different credentials. No ties to their systems, just mine, and on it, Delta Vest, not a replica, not a clone, the version. Clean-coded, modular, scalable. With refinements I'd never submitted to the internal repo because they'd never have made it through Tanya's meat grinder of design approval cycles. Every real improvement, the stuff that made Delta actually worth acquiring, lived here, in my world. I opened the files. The code glowed like an old friend. Version logs, pilot modules, anonymized datasets from sandbox testing. All legal, all mine, because Tanya hadn't just killed a project, she'd walked away from an asset she never actually owned. Her own ignorance had set me free. I flipped through the folders with ice in my veins. Every file was intact. Every update timestamped. I pulled up the legal clause from the contract again, just to be sure. There it was in black and white. Ownership of intellectual property transfers upon final deployment and internal sign-off. We never hit final deployment. Tanya had pulled the plug. She had nuked the bridge before she walked across it. They didn't just lose a project. They lost the only leverage they had over the space we were pioneering. And Tanya, in her brilliance, had broadcasted the failure to leadership without realizing she'd thrown away the patent seed. She thought she was gutting a cost center. What she did was amputate their future. I opened my inbox, my real inbox, and typed a short message to an address labeled J. Gray. "It's live. Let me know when you're ready to demo for healthcare." Jay Gray was an investor contact I'd met through a freelancer I hired months ago, someone who understood what Delta Vest could be. We'd been in quiet talks. No one knew, not even Kim. I leaned back in my chair, not with satisfaction, not with smugness, but with the terrifying calm that comes right after a storm touches down. They had kicked me out of their kingdom. Fine, but they'd forgotten that I built the drawbridge. And now the moat belonged to me. It started on a Tuesday, not the dramatic kind, just one of those limp, gray Tuesdays where the coffee tastes burnt and every meeting feels like a slow lobotomy. That's when Tanya first mentioned streamlining redundancies in a department-wide Zoom. Her camera off. Her voice thin and metallic, like it was being piped in from a different galaxy, one where everything was branded and no one blinked. That night, after another 12-hour day of being both the architect and janitor of Delta, I sat on the floor of my apartment, surrounded by code printouts and protein bar wrappers, and did something I hadn't done since college. I started thinking like a founder, not a manager, not a middle cog, a founder. Delta Vest was born 3 days later, quietly, legally, clean. I filed the DBA through a third-party service and registered a two-person LLC in Delaware under an alias my late aunt used to sign her poetry. It cost me $158 and a slice of my soul. I'd always told myself I wasn't that kind of person, the ones who hoard power, prep exits, whisper over cocktails about IPOs. But you know what? Turns out you become that kind of person real fast when someone tries to erase your fingerprints from your own invention. I knew I couldn't just clone Delta and slap a new logo on it. That'd be suicide, so I rebuilt it. From scratch. Nights, weekends, vacation days, I faked to avoid being dragged into yet another collab storm with BizOps. I hired a freelance dev in Poland who specialized in secure API shells. I bartered UX work with an old friend who'd gone indie after burning out at Shopify. I coded the back-end logic on the same laptop I'd written my undergrad thesis on. Slow but reliable. No spyware, no leaks. And every line of code was clean. Not a single line copied from the company repo. I made sure of it. I knew legal would come knocking if anything smelled like it came from their systems, so I sandboxed everything. Documented the dev process. Logged timestamps. Stored iterations offsite. This was mine, and I was going to make sure it stayed that way. The engine that powered Delta? Reimagined, more elegant, less bloated. Designed for external clients this time, not internal bureaucrats who needed 10 meetings to approve a drop-down menu. I even updated the data models to support multi-client deployment, with modular compliance architecture baked in. Translation, I made it useful to people who would actually pay for it. The name Delta Vest came to me while brushing my teeth. I liked how it sounded, like a hedge fund and a rocket booster had a baby. And it worked. It looked real. It was real, hell. I even printed fake business cards and left one accidentally on a conference table at a DevOps mixer in Chicago. The silence afterward was delicious. But here's the thing, I didn't build Delta Vest out of revenge, not at first. I built it because I was tired of begging to matter. Of watching execs repackage my ideas like takeout leftovers, serving them cold in investor meetings with my name edited out of the pitch deck. And I was tired, so tired, of pretending that being indispensable meant being safe. It doesn't. What keeps you safe is leverage. And leverage looks a lot like a functioning beta platform with a pilot-ready interface, signed NDAs from 2 mid-sized partners, and a clean IP trail that ends with your name on the patent filing. Which brings me back to that contract. Clause 6b, buried under pages of legal boilerplate, right after the section about non-compete terms and termination conditions. I remember the wording because I read it 3 times, mouth dry. Ownership of intellectual property transfers to company upon final deployment, completion sign-off, and integration into core infrastructure systems. Guess what Tanya never gave me? Final deployment, completion sign-off, integration into core systems. She pulled the plug before any of that happened, which means she also pulled the clause. She cut the wire that would have made their claim bulletproof. What she really did, what she'll never admit, is walk away from the only part of Delta the company ever truly had a right to. She assumed silence meant surrender. But silence is just the sound of someone building something better without you. And by the time she realized that, Delta Vest had already left the station. The first outage hit 3 days after they iced me. Not a big one, just a little hiccup in the client access portal. Just enough to trigger a round of passive-aggressive emails with subject lines like urgent, intermittent issues, and quick fix or larger concern. I watched from my couch with a warm beer in one hand and my cat asleep on my thigh as the system I'd held together with dental floss and midnight patch jobs began quietly, inevitably, folding in on itself. By the end of the week, it wasn't a hiccup in him. It was a chain reaction. Delta had never been just a tool, it was the invisible scaffolding behind 3 departments' daily operations. User authentication? Delta. Billing logic? Delta. Automated compliance flags that saved their asses during audits? All Delta. Tanya didn't know that because Tanya never asked. She saw it as a non-core product, a legacy nuisance, so she killed it like you'd kill a flickering light bulb. No transition plan, no backup protocol, just a Slack message that said, "We've sunsetted the module. Notify if urgent," and the fallout? Deliciously quiet. DevOps had to manually route client access with a patchwork of old scripts. Marketing lost its /B data. Billing sent out 6 invoices to the same client. I heard someone from sales actually cried during a Zoom because his demo login failed mid-pitch and the prospect ghosted afterward. I didn't revel in it, not exactly. It's more like I watched it the way you watch a building you used to live in get fumigated. You hope they survive it, but you know damn well they won't without calling the one person who actually read the manual. Tanya, naturally, did what all corporate climbers do when the tide turns red. She blamed the map. Legacy systems, poor documentation, unscalable code. That last one made me laugh so hard I nearly spit out my drink. I built Delta to scale before they even hired a CTO. But now that it didn't work without me, it was suddenly bad code. I kept my name out of it. Instead, I focused on what was in front of me. Delta Vest had its first real lead, a healthcare startup looking for an intake coordination system that could integrate with insurance databases without lighting itself on fire. They didn't want flashy. They wanted dependable. I gave them a sandbox. 2 weeks later, I got a signed pilot agreement. 3 months of usage. Mid-5-figure deal. Small, sure, but it wasn't about the money. It was about proof that the engine still ran, that I still ran. I onboarded them myself, updated documentation, created a custom dashboard that tracked usage metrics in real time. When they launched the first module and nothing broke, the CTO emailed me 5 words. "Why doesn't everyone build like this?" I cried. Just for a second, then I got back to work. And then, like clockwork, the email came from my old team. Not directly, of course. They weren't that bold. It came from Nick, the same product strategist who once asked me if APIs were optional, asking if I had any personal notes or leftover docs that could help explain why Delta's alerts weren't triggering properly anymore. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened a secure browser and logged into an encrypted mailbox I'd set up under the name A. Vale. A fake name, an old high school inside joke. And I composed a message to one of the company's board members, Marissa Chan. Marissa had been on the board for 3 years. Smart, quiet, surgical. She was the only one I remembered asking intelligent questions during our last product roadmap presentation. The only one who, after the meeting, pulled me aside and said, "If you ever build something for real, let me know." I figured now qualified. I kept the message simple. "Miss Chan, I'm reaching out anonymously to share a platform we believe aligns with your company's current acquisition targets. We've recently deployed a pilot in the healthcare vertical and received strong early indicators. Our technology directly addresses the gap left by a discontinued internal product at your firm. Enclosed, demo access and product overview. Regards, a Vale founder, Delta Vest. No threats, no dramatics, just a breadcrumb." When I knew she'd follow, I hit send, logged out, closed the laptop. Then I sat back and looked around my apartment, the cheap laminate floor, the flickering kitchen light, the inbox that had once felt like a shackle and now felt like a weapon. I wasn't bitter, not really. Bitterness is wanting them to regret it. I didn't care if they regretted anything. I just wanted to make sure they remembered who built the thing they were now bleeding to replace, and that she was no longer available. Not to fix it, not to save it, not to apologize, not anymore. They called it Operation Horizon. I saw the headline pop up on LinkedIn before the internal leaks even reached me through the usual whisper chain. A sleek press release from the parent company's comms team, buzzwords polished to a corporate sheen, pioneering new growth frontiers in platform integration. Translation? They finally realized they'd gutted their only in-house solution and now needed to buy their way back into relevance. It was almost flattering. Almost. The board had apparently greenlit a $12 million acquisition budget to identify and onboard a next-gen platform that aligns with post-Delta strategic objectives. I read that line twice, then again, slowly post-Delta. Like Delta was an ex-boyfriend whose toothbrush they tossed but whose Netflix password they still needed. I waited a day. Then I forwarded the press release to Jay Gray, my silent investor, with a single note: "It's time." Within 48 hours, Delta Vest had submitted a response to the RFP. Not from my name, of course. The reply came from one of our shell entities, Stratus 6, boutique investment firm out of Colorado that existed on paper, bankrolled by my own damn severance package and Jay Gray's early capital. It looked real. Clean. Small enough to be emerging, polished enough to be serious. Our proposal was tight. 1-page executive summary, 2 demo logins, pilot data from the healthcare client, and a technical brief that danced just close enough to Delta's original specs to tickle memory, without ever ringing alarm bells. Platform's name? Axo-Nice. Nobody would connect it to Delta. Nobody should have. And yet, within a week, I heard Tanya had labeled us irrelevant, not scalable, too small to matter, probably vaporware. She said it during a strategy meeting, according to someone who still owed me a favor. Laughed while saying it, apparently. A little too hard. The kind of laugh that's half defense mechanism, half caffeine tremor, but the board didn't laugh. Marissa Chan flagged us for second-round consideration. Another director forwarded the AXO NIC brief to legal for due diligence. Tanya didn't like that. She pushed two bigger names, one of them a clunky Saw-S dinosaur run by a guy who still uses Outlook calendar invites without time zones. The board told her they wanted something new, something lean, something like us. Still, I waited. No gloating, no champagne, just watched the ripples form. And then came the conference. Tech Bridge Summit, San Diego, the kind of event where VCs wear jeans and call it founder energy and vendors spend 10 grand on a booth to hand out free socks. I didn't even plan to go at first, but Jay Gray insisted. Said the lead buyer from the parent company would be there. Said I should be seen, not as myself, but as momentum, so I went. Not as Samantha the employee, not even as Samantha the founder. I went as Samantha Vale, Director of Strategic Partnerships at AXO NIC. New suit, new badge. Hair straightened and glasses swapped for contacts. It felt weird, not costume weird, more like stepping into a version of myself I'd buried beneath years of trying to be appropriate. I didn't have a booth. I didn't need one, just floated, attended panels, took meetings, let the buzz build naturally. On the second day, I caught him watching me, Elliot Rains, VP of Corporate Acquisitions. His name tag was crooked. He was sipping flat soda from a branded cup and scrolling through something on his phone. When I passed his table, he glanced up and froze. Wait, he said, standing. Don't I know? I smiled. You're Sam? Samantha? From Delta. It wasn't a question. I extended a hand. Samantha Vale, AXO NIC. He blinked. Right, of course. The silence stretched between us like an unplayed card. Then he chuckled. Hell of a coincidence. I didn't blink, or maybe just good timing. We sat, talked shop. He asked a few softball questions about infrastructure, team size, roadmap. I kept it breezy, professional, didn't oversell, didn't even mention Delta. Let the product speak. Let him connect the dots. As I walked away an hour later, I heard him mutter to himself, just loud enough, too small to matter, my ass. That night, I got an email from the RFP committee. We'd like to invite AXO NIC to present a formal demo to the acquisition panel next month. NDA attached. Selection team, Operation Horizon. I closed my laptop and stared out my hotel window, watching planes line up for approach, lights flickering like pulse signals. They were coming, and I would be ready. Tanya hit the circuit like a pageant queen with a grudge. There she was on LinkedIn Live panels, in TechCrunch sidebars, smiling onstage at a digital innovation symposium in Scottsdale, wearing a blazer that cost more than the entire front-end dev budget she'd just slashed, talking about new blood and operational agility like she hadn't just amputated her own spine. The irony? She was being celebrated. Interviewers lapped it up, called her a strategic catalyst, asked softball questions about how she managed legacy inefficiencies. She used phrases like sunsetting non-scalable frameworks without ever saying what she'd actually replaced them with. The board shared her posts. Investors liked them. Clients retweeted them. For a minute, it looked like Tanya had pulled it off, scrubbed her little purge clean, and polished it into a TED talk she never had to give. But inside, the floorboards were creaking. By Q2, internal attrition had doubled. The last two engineers on the Delta maintenance team jumped ship. The marketing director retired early. Even the receptionist left. Her exit interview reportedly included the phrase, Tanya made the plants nervous. And then there were the clients. It started with a delay. Just a week, Tanya's team said. But when the updated client portal rolled out, it didn't just underdeliver, it underfunctioned. Logins timed out. Reporting dashboards stalled. Fortune 500 pilot client issued a formal complaint. Another client asked if they could temporarily revert to the previous backend. Tanya told them it had been fully deprecated, which was corporate speak for, we lit it on fire and pretended it was a strategic bonfire. Whispers reached the boardroom. Not loud ones, just enough. Wasn't the original system better? Didn't Delta already solve this? Is the new solution actually live yet? Tanya responded the only way she knew how, with more noise. She pushed back harder in meetings, overpromised on roadmaps, told one investor they'd be rolling out AI-integrated dashboards by Q3, despite the fact that her current dev team barely had the capacity to fix a broken navbar. She started snapping. An assistant who missed a calendar update? Fired. A PM who asked about legacy metrics during a review? Reassigned to strategic alignment workstreams. Whatever those were. At one all-hands, she reportedly said, we don't need nostalgia, we need winners. Then she spent 10 minutes blaming old code ghosts for current failures. Meanwhile, Delta Vest was humming along. The healthcare pilot was not only stable, it was expanding. We'd onboarded a second clinic group and were now being evaluated by a private insurer for broader integration. AXO NIC. Our Shell brand was gaining traction. We'd even gotten a mention in a mid-size VC blog as a dark horse in operational platforming. Cute, let them think that. Then came the board's email, not to Tanya, not directly. It went to the acquisition committee, Marissa Chan included. The subject line was simple, request, live demo AXO NIC platform, Delta Vest infrastructure. Apparently, Elliot Rains had pushed for it. After our chat in San Diego, he'd started asking questions Tanya couldn't answer. Like why the new system was 6 months behind schedule, why there was no performance delta between old and new, why one of the rejected RFP applicants seemed to have data that looked suspiciously like the original Delta framework, only sleeker. The demo was set for 2 weeks later. Internal only, full NDA, CEO in the room. Tanya wasn't happy. Word is she threw a dry erase marker at the wall and told someone to kill it before it spreads. But it was too late. She'd already triggered the immune response. What she didn't understand was that corporate doesn't care who's loudest. It cares who delivers. And right now, the only thing Tanya was delivering was a slow, very public unspooling of her credibility. I wasn't celebrating, not yet, but I could feel it, the shift. The current turning under the surface. Not fast, not loud, but definite. They brought in extra chairs. That was my first clue. Board meetings at that level didn't usually run out of seating, not unless something big was brewing. The kind of big that made people nervous enough to not want to stand when the fallout hit. The Delta Vest demo had been a success. Not a runaway standing ovation, but a slow, deliberate silence. The kind that settles in a room when people realize they've been sold the wrong map for 6 months and just found the real compass in someone else's hands. The tech worked. The metrics were tight, the roadmap was executable. No fluff, no vision boards, just product and proof. Now came the acquisition pitch. They called it a discussion. Everyone knew it was a formality. The board had already made up their mind. The room was all glass and polished steel, the kind of space designed to remind you that you can be replaced. Tanya sat at the head of the table, stiff in a navy dress that looked vacuum-sealed. Her expression was carefully neutral, but her fingers tapped beneath the table, 2 beats, then 3. A tell. She always did that when someone asked a question she didn't know the answer to. The assistant opened the door. Delta Vest delegations here. 4 people entered. A blend of legal and investor reps. One of the advisors gave a respectful nod to the room. Then I walked in, last. My heels didn't click, they landed. Tanya blinked. Her jaw tensed, she didn't stand, didn't speak. I stopped halfway down the table and met her eyes. You said I was terminated, I said. Calm, even, and you revoked access to a system you didn't own. Someone on the legal team looked up. The board members shifted slightly, like they already knew the script, like they'd been waiting for this scene. Marissa Chan gave me the faintest nod, when she'd deny later if asked. Tanya's mouth opened a fraction. This is, Miss Vale is here representing Delta Vest, Elliot Rains said smoothly, cutting her off. They are the recommended acquisition target for Operation Horizon, effective immediately. Tanya tried again. This was not already signed, another voice added. One of the company's senior counsel. He opened a folder and began distributing documents down the table. Executed yesterday. The acquisition agreement includes full platform integration, licensing rights, and transitional support services. Tanya reached for the paper. Her hand trembled just slightly. I didn't sit, I just watched. You shut down a product you didn't understand, I said, then tried to rebuild it with half the staff and none of the source. And when it failed, you blamed the people who were already gone. That's not what happened, she said through her teeth. I didn't argue. I didn't need to. The clause was printed on page 3 of the contract, highlighted in soft blue. Ownership of all IP remains with Delta Vest unless previously deployed and signed off within a certified infrastructure release cycle. Her signature wasn't on it. Mine was. Tanya looked around the room, waiting for anyone to come to her rescue. No one did, because they weren't watching her anymore. They were watching me. The founder, the architect, the woman they'd fired without reading the contract. The silence stretched. Then the CEO turned to legal. Let's proceed with integration planning, he said. Then to me like it was an afterthought, welcome back, I nodded once. No gloating, no monologue, just power restored. I turned toward the door. The assistant held it open. As I walked past Tanya, she tried one last time. You can't just come back like this. I paused, glanced at her. Let the weight of it land. I didn't come back, I said. You bought the system I built to replace you. And then I left the room. Not as an employee, but as the owner. I'd never seen a glass table look nervous before. But in that moment, dead quiet, not a pen clicking or throat cleared, it somehow radiated tension. Like even the furniture knew something irreversible was about to happen. I didn't raise my voice, didn't preamble, just reached into my folder and slid one piece of paper across the table to the board's legal counsel. Printed, unfolded, signed. This is the original assignment agreement from my contract, I said, the one governing all intellectual property created during my tenure. The counsel adjusted his glasses. He was the kind of man who kept a fountain pen in his shirt pocket and had never been late to a meeting in his life. He read fast, jaw tightening 1 centimeter as his eyes scanned line after line. I continued, softly. The project Tanya terminated Delta, it wasn't just an internal tool. It was the foundation for the company's first external-facing acquisition. I paused, and it was mine. The board leaned in. No one reached for coffee. No one touched their phones. Even the assistant in the corner had stopped breathing. Legal flipped the document over, highlighted in pale yellow. Dead center on the second page was the clause. In the absence of final deployment, full integration, and certified system sign-off, Ownership of developed intellectual property reverts to the creator. No legalese, no ambiguity. Tanya's voice broke the silence, brittle and frantic. This is absurd. That clause, no one flagged that clause. The CEO turned to her. Calm, dangerous. How exactly did you vet this termination? Tanya flinched like he'd slapped her. HR signed off. Compliance never saw the deployment records. Legal interrupted, looking directly at her now, because final deployment never occurred. Miss Vale's access was revoked before sign-off, which means he tapped the document once. She owns the platform entirely. Silence fell like a dropped guillotine. Tanya's hands trembled as she reached for her tablet, scrolling through what I assumed were old Slack messages, memos, digital life preservers. There were none because you can't undo what you never understood in the first place. She'd killed the thing keeping her afloat and paid the creator to come rescue the shipwreck. The board didn't argue, they didn't debate. What was done was done. One director asked quietly, can she stay on through the transition? I answered before the CEO could. No, I didn't say it with spite. I said it like you'd say the door is closed or the lights turned red. A fact, a boundary, a conclusion. Meeting wrapped in record time. No one looked Tanya in the eye as they filed out. I waited until the room was mostly empty before standing. My new badge was clipped to my blazer, still crisp from the welcome packet they'd couriered the day before. I walked toward the exit, heels steady, heart silent. Tanya stood near the window, staring out like she might find a version of herself on the street below that hadn't screwed this up beyond repair. She turned as I passed. No apology, no threat. Just that look people get when they finally realize the storm didn't pass them by, it started from within. At the elevator, I tapped my badge to the scanner. It chirped once. Green, the doors opened. I stepped in. Alone. And as they closed, I didn't look back, because the system she erased was the one I now owned. And the woman they underestimated was the one now holding the keys. Appreciate you sticking around, you legends of the break room. Subscribe for more chaos. Let's make your old managers spill their coffee in fear.